December 11th, work session, 11 a.m., all members present.
Okay, I think first we are to talk about two site plans. You all have copies of a proposal to construct this 166,000 square foot retail store on the site of the old movie theater in Comac. You've all reviewed that. And in the industrial park, there's a proposal to construct a 29,190 square foot industrial office building. Anybody have any objections? You have signed off on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me, Supervisor, I know on the copy I had downstairs, the Lowe's, site plan did not have the applicant's signature in the box. Have they, agreeing to the conditions?
They've agreed to all the conditions.
They have, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll just try to get in some kind of an order here. Okay, first topic we'll talk about is the unsafe structures and properties. Oh, okay. Last month, or 2 months before, we had a list of 11 properties. We had met in August, and there were 17 properties that were either deemed to be unsafe or structurally damaged, and we asked the building official to go and inspect those. The result of that was this list here, which I think you all have. Do you have them?
Yes.
Okay. And I've been meeting with the town attorney on moving these along, and you might want to tell them what you're proposing, John, on the, or certainly on the ones that are unsafe and unsound.
Good morning. On the unsafe structures, my recommendation is a resolution is submitted to advertise for a public hearing. The public hearing will be held in January to declare, starting out with 4 sites with unsafe structures, and then set forth a course of action after the public hearing, assuming that we can establish that those are unsafe structures, then move towards the demolition as each case is appropriate, as appropriate for each case. And then with the remaining ones, once we start with the 4, then move on, maybe do 2 or 3 at a time, so we're not taking on too much all at once. And one of the things the supervisor and I had discussion about was, why not just advertise them all at once and just declare them all unsafe? And I thought that would frustrate the purposes of the ordinance. We're trying to give people notice and due process, opportunity to be heard. If we decide to put them on now and we don't get to those properties until May or June, circumstances might change. So I think as we start with the 4, then we'll see with the next 2 or 3, and it's the board's decision, obviously, how many you want to do at a time.
Well, my thought, John, and I might have said it to you, was, one, I don't think we ought to hold them on a town board meeting day, that they ought to be public hearing established. Take a day. We can do 3 or 4 in one day, and the following week, do the 3, 4. If we've established that the building is unfounded and unsafe, then I think delaying it down the line just puts us in a untenable position. So it's up to the board. I mean, I'm willing to go all day or 2 or 3 days.
Quicker the better on these, you know?
It's the
I mean,
board's-
that's something you should think about and just tell us what you decide.
Well, I guess the question for the board is, if you want to put a day aside, and we'll do the 4 that we have set for January,
Good?
and then put a day aside for the next public hearing and do that. And if you want to do-
Exactly. So we could do 4 a week or something like that. I don't know,
Well,
unless they do have a problem.
Sooner the better.
Yeah.
So my concern is, I guess my concern is that you do a public hearing, let's just say we have a public hearing, another public hearing at the end of January. But for whatever reasons, whether it's budgetary or manpower, whatever the case may be, we can't get to take action on it till May or June.
Right.
Circumstances change, so really what you have to do, I think, is just say, okay, we're gonna do these in January, but we're gonna move on them, so we take care of we take the immediate action, as opposed to saying we have to do whatever the budget process, and that's officially not my concern, but you have to be realistic. You gotta pay for these things, and it's gonna be a cost to town, plus you have so much resources that you can expend on these things. So, but regardless, we could do it as, my concern is public hearing and not have too much lag time between the action to demolish
Correct,
the structures.
right.
So
And
that's all.
that day ought to be a public hearing just for these purposes.
That's fine. That's,
Well,
Okay,
you have a public hearing on today for two of them, don't you?
those are,
cleanups.
property maintenance.
Property maintenance, yeah.
That's one is, well, there's the High Tower Homes, and the other one is Fairview, and I do believe, Mr. Haynes, who's the principal of Fairview, came to my office yesterday. He's gonna be here at 2 o'clock. He's gonna request for 30-day adjournment of the public hearing, and I didn't see a problem with that.
You know, I don't, because he's been asking, I got tons of correspondence from his attorneys to the town attorney's office. You've seen them all,
Yeah.
John. And all he's asking is work with him so he can get access to his property, since the MTA cut him off.
Yeah.
And it's been since before you, it's been since Yvonne's
Well-
era, that basically he's kind of got no cooperation towards the process of getting onto his property,
Well,
that
and
he's
as
been
I,
landlocked.
and I told him yesterday, and he'll be here today at 2 o'clock, my recommendation was put that public hearing over for 30 days. If he has a proposal that he wants the town to consider, apparently he's not represented by an attorney anymore, he's doing it on his own. I said, put a letter in writing with the proposal of what you want, and the board would consider it. And as you have to be mindful of, when it comes to Fairview, we won in court, and the property is zoned residential. He lost, the MTA cut his access to the property, so it's a landlocked piece of property which
Right.
has some structures and it has some potential benefit. So, let's see what he has in his proposal. I told him to address it to me or the town board. If I get it, he'll distribute it, I'll distribute it to the board.
Well, what I've seen on that, just so everybody knows, his property comes up to our roadway that comes in off of the parking lot. You get the roadway that goes right to his curb cut. He's just asking for some sort of permission that he knows that he can get onto his property to do things. He says, why should I spend a lot of money here? I'm landlocked, I can't get onto my property. I've been working with the town for over 3 years, with the former town attorney, went nowhere, and I'm willing to do it, but help us.
But
Let's
here's the
stop
thing about it,
landlocking
this
us.
is the
It's
conversation.
either stop charging
But
me
John,
property.
before,
Let me finish.
what are the boundaries? I mean, what are the boundaries of the property?
Not-
What is the railroad, I'm assuming?
Well, he had an original easement right along the railroad tracks. They
Right,
put the bridge up over, cut
Right.
off his easement.
Right.
He also has another way out to the municipal parking lot, which is
through,
the street.
through the park.
Yeah,
the
no,
parking
right at
lot.
the parking lot. The street comes straight in right to his property. He's just asking for permission or a lease agreement or $1 a year or whatever it might be to be able to get out of his property. Right now, he's paying property tax. He's landlocked. He can't get onto his property. He says, why should I clean it up? Why I'm landlocked?
And what did you say was residential property?
Well, John
It's
did that.
residential
And the
zone.
bottom line is, if you did a lease agreement, you say, listen, you'll get a lease agreement, but it will be revoked if you do anything else other than what the zoning category is. But the man doesn't really deserve to be paying property taxes to the county, state, town, schools. He can't even get onto his own property. There's
But I
not
think,
fair.
but I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. I spoke to him, we're gonna adjourn this for 30 days. Just so you know, his attorney rejected the license agreement. But keep in mind that we didn't create the problem for him. But my suggestion was, put a proposal in writing to the town board. It's a residentially zoned piece of property, there's not much you can do with it. But it might have value if the town could use it for some purpose, or transfer development rights or something along those lines. Because I believe it's like a 3/4 acre piece of property with 2 structures on it. And it has a
That's a
value.
very good idea, the TDR right there. That'd be a
So-
perfect thing for it.
And that's why I said, but I'm the town attorney, I said, make the recommendation, put it in writing to the board. I said, understand, he's in a tough spot. We could try to work and assist, if there's a benefit to him and a benefit to the town, maybe there's something that could be done with the purchase of TDRs. Because we get complaints from, the neighbors in the back about graffiti and,
No, it's definitely a
so,
mess.
but I think
You-
my suggestion would be, put this over for 30 days, let him put it in writing, and then we can have an opportunity to see what he wants to do,
And
and
then-
maybe the purpose, there's a benefit to the
I mean,
town.
he gets, I'd prefer rather than have him come to the hearing and explain what his problems are. And let him tell everybody in front at the audience, tell him, here's my problem, not just a letter that goes back, well, I don't like this letter, you don't like this letter, I don't like this. Let him,
But-
the man come in and tell us everything, what his problems are, so it's out in the open, so that everybody in the community knows what's going on.
But I could tell you what his problems are right now without, and John, I think we should put it over for 30 days, but his problem is he lost in court. He's got a residential zone piece of property. As an accommodation, the town said, we'll give you a license agreement across the town parking lot, but you have to pay an amount. We got permission from the MTA to do that. But it still puts him in a predicament where he's got a piece of property that's only allowed for residential use. So whether he has access to it or not, his problem is it's a residential zone piece of property. although some of the things that came up that make some sense would be making like a taxi cab living over there, but those are things that the board could consider as well. But it's a residential zone piece of property, and I told this to Mr. Haynes, it's landlocked, not because of anything that we did.
The MTA.
It's the MTA did it. And I got, and you could see, and as Tommy, you know, Councilman McCarthy, as you know, the MTA was, we went back and forth since January of this year. We got permission from the MTA to allow us to do an agreement with him because the funding that was
And his
taken.
attorney rejected that?
His attorney rejected it, yeah.
I don't
So-
know.
But,
That was silly.
Well,
But
let me
I-
just ask one question, we'll move on. He wants access to his property for what reason?
To get onto it, clean it, paint it, he says.
Oh, it's there's a building there?
Yeah, he can clean
I
up the
think there's
graffiti.
2 buildings.
Oh,
This is going on for over a decade and a half.
But we've,
Yeah.
I mean, since
Okay.
I'm here supervising since, you know, the
Yeah,
beginning of this
yeah,
year, and I think we've made progress, and Mr. Haynes was amenable to saying if it works something with the town, because I think there's a public purpose that might be served, whether it's TDR value or municipal purpose for that building, that there might be a way to do it. So,
If he's gonna write a letter or whatever his ideas are, make sure you disseminate it to the full
well,
board.
that's what I said.
So everybody knows what's going on.
No, that's what I said,
Yeah.
whether he addresses it to me, he'll be here at 2 o'clock today,
Mhm.
so, if he addresses it to the board, if he came to me, I'm gonna distribute it to the whole board anyhow, so, either way.
All right, thanks.
I think that's a good approach to it.
All right, great.
okay, I see lots of people here interested in the second item. Special use permit request for vehicle storage, or request from 2 entities, which I sent to the board. You want to discuss that? This is special use,
Yeah,
you know what we're
for the- yeah,
talking
for-
about?
You're talking about for
To
the,
allow the storage of storm-damaged vehicles for up to a period of 1 year, as I understand
I
it.
think there's some representatives from the company supervisor.
For both companies?
I don't, I think,
One,
Gotcha.
Mr. Supervisor, Leonard Shore, members of the
yeah,
board.
come up, Lane.
well, did you just want to have,
Well, you know, really, this is not a meeting where we have people speak to it.
I know, but-
Honestly, we don't. I'm sorry.
I have no problem, I
Okay,
understand it's a work
okay.
session if you want, however, there are representatives, both
Sure.
Mr. Santilli
Well,
and the
well, the-
VIAA present.
The town attorney will go
If you have
over,
questions.
town attorney will go over what the proposals are. You have them, John. It's simply that they wish to store vehicles that were damaged in a storm for up to a year till they're adjudicated, or adjusted is the better word. And each of the, I don't know what I sent you guys the other
We have them, yeah.
co-plays in the other company.
Right.
I don't know which each is offering and doesn't town want to consider the money offers. I don't know.
see, I think, as Mr. Shore is here, I think as a representative for the property owner, I think Mr. O'Hara is here, as a broker working to put this together. I believe a representative is here from, I don't know if it's IAI.
Is that also, there's one I saw was co-play?
Copart?
Co-part?
Yeah.
No one,
So basically, the proposal is asking for a special permit or permission to store vehicles on this piece of property for a period of time not to exceed a year. These are the vehicles that were totaled as a result of Hurricane Sandy, and the insurance companies are looking for places to store them and then ultimately be removed. And in consideration of the town granted such a request, they're offering to pay $100,000 to the town of Smithtown for that benefit.
each of the entities, there are 3 now. 2
Well,
back there.
it would be one, it's from the insurance, the
Oh,
IAI.
Oh, I see.
So they're requesting to give us $100,000 for a special use permit?
It's not really a special use permit because you can't have a special use permit. Remember, this is property that I believe is
That's what
owned
the
like
letter said.
industrial. Yeah, but there's no outdoor storage. This is outdoor storage.
So how do you do it then?
You
It's
just-
illegal.
You would just create in theory, it arises out of the hurricane, so you could say, as the governor had made an executive order looking for properties to store this equipment on, the other cars on. But right now, as the town code, and I think Frank, so Frank, I mean, there's no provision for this in the code. You'd be creating an exception to allow
To that
these
zoning
one,
category.
just a one-shot deal to take care of what's an immediate concern, and that's all it is, so.
And there's some environmental concerns also. I
Right.
believe I read that Riverhead were directed to move some of their vehicles out. that they
Well, I
had stored.
called the DEC on this, and they said there are no regulations. There are some guidelines. I think in the Riverhead case, they were concerned that the vehicles are parked on grass.
On grass, yeah.
I believe the property in question is just earthen property, correct?
Yep. And that's the only reason why they're here, is if there's any questions that we have, them, they're here, that's all. Because I think this is a unique set of circumstances. But Frank,
Before Frank talks, let me just ask, this is all one entity that's seeking this permit?
there's a property owner, and there's the
Insurance
insurance
carrier.
company,
Okay.
that's it.
And the insurance, there's only one insurance company?
That's it, yes.
Well, who's co-pay? Co-pay.
Who's co-part? We have a thing from Sean P. Yadin.
They left, sir. They left the island because they were the ones who were parking on
Okay,
grass
okay.
and other spots that were illegal. IAA has been in compliance with DEC and the towns, with these guys.
What's an III? What does those initials mean exactly?
It means Insurance Auto Auctions.
So, okay.
Incorporated.
So it's basically you're an auction, you're not working for the insurance company.
We receive the cars directly from the insurance company, and we hold the cars until the title comes back from the state, and then they're sold off at the next.
Right, but they wouldn't be auctioned out of that facility.
We're doing a screen sale only at our main facility,
Right, this is strictly the storage.
just strictly for storage. Yes, sir.
Well, I for one,
The property's owned by the
Yes, it is.
I like to give this some thought and not make a rash decision today. That's me. If the board wants to do that, they can.
No, I think we should. I think we should hear from
I'm not so sure that
Mr.
the,
Rubies and Mr. Bonet.
whatever aggravation that might come from that is worth $100,000. I don't know. So I'd like to think about that.
Could I
The board
address the
wants to
zoning
move.
issues with regard to this? Currently, as most of the board is aware, you're not allowed outdoor storage in a light industrial area. So strictly speaking, from a zoning point of view, it is a prohibited use unless you amend the zoning code, and that's your prerogative to do. However, there is another element that the board can look at it, but this would require the town attorney to examine this particular issue. You as a municipality can deal with temporary issues. This is, in other words, emergencies and other elements that you feel are compelling municipal interest, that you are permitted within certain guidelines to supersede your zoning ordinance. However, it's not a blanket permission. There's a 9-part test that the board has to go through in order to do this. We've done this before on other aspects to, such as the antennas at the highway department and others that have municipal purposes on it, to exempt it. But in order for you to consider that, the town attorney would have to prepare an analysis that say that, there is some sort of compelling municipal interest in at this particular point. And then, if that is successful, you are able to do that for the period of time. But it's no longer a zoning matter, it's an issue that you would deal with.
Even though the governor has issued an executive order to move these vehicles from where they are and need places to store them.
I don't know of, what happens in government is as you are aware, sometimes one agency will give an order, but we have other things that are in the way. Unless somebody knows of another way, the only thing I can think of is to classify this as a temporary matter, not a permanent zoning matter, exempt it from zoning with a 9-part test if the municipality feels that it is compelling. And there are some elements of this that are compelling. I mean, this is an island-wide problem, and it's not just, we're not just looking at necessarily the town of Smithtown, so I think there is some latitude here, but I think that absent this 9-part test that you're going to do, you legally cannot do this. And
I think it's very important that they're asking for a temporary special use permit, not blanket special use, temporary.
The other issue with regard to this is what the supervisor mentioned, which is really more of DEW's concern, is the environmental issue and how this is to be managed in terms of that. You gotta remember, the area that we're speaking about is right above the groundwater, because it's been mined. So it is
Well,
not,
let me just say something. One, I would like to ask, the property, has the owner of that property been a good neighbor? You don't have to say that now, I'll find out from you later. Number two, why is it compelling for the town of Smithtown to store vehicles in an area which is not the best-looking area in Smithtown? It's an industrial site. Why would we want to do that? Is the $100,000 worth it?
no. I mean, if you were
Well, I
to,
don't know, I
100,
shouldn't be
you
as-
know, but
that's a
I don't,
rhetorical question, does
no,
deserve an answer.
But I would say if there is a municipal, I would say, looking at the island as a whole, I see that this is a problem.
No,
As a
it's
planner.
not. I have not heard from any government official to say, would the town of Smithtown store vehicles?
No.
This is private enterprise looking to make a dollar.
But I think, I think this can be debated back and forth, but the issue is that we have a lot of storm damage that we have to deal with. And how we deal with it as a town and as a entity, I think these vehicles are there, they have to be put somewhere. I'm not saying that they have to be
Where
put
are
in-
they, Frank?
Well, right now, they're in Calverton, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, but there are cars all over New York City that have to be moved, all over Nassau County, that have to be moved and have to go someplace. And you had mentioned that this was a part of an overall problem. We've just had a terrible storm, and you could look at this, although this may be a little idealistic, that the town of Smithtown is doing, if we choose to do it, what is right to help out the insurance company, in this case, which has to put these cars someplace to get them off the streets. There's no place for them to go in Nassau or New York City.
But I think the most important thing, before you get to any analysis in terms of a 9-point test, is the board has to.
Want to do it.
And the board has to say, we're interested in doing this. And then, once you say you're interested in doing it, then we'll go through the analysis. And I think Frank's point is there's validity, it's an unusual set of circumstances, historically, it's never happened before. And the question is the incidental benefit to the town, that's fine, but more important, you have to establish a policy. The town historically has never done anything like this before. We never had a storm like this before.
Where are these vehicles now? Well, I don't want,
Maybe where.
What are they?
They're still throughout Long Island, New York City, Queens, the boroughs, Long Beach. They're still at residence houses on the streets being picked up.
But I think some of the questions you don't know the answer to.
Yep.
How many cars we're talking about? Once the year is up or the 6 month is up, what's the guarantee that the vehicles are gonna be
Yeah,
removed?
well,
And-
all those conditions have to be put in place first. And I'd like to hear from
And Russ
Mr.
doesn't-
Barnett also.
Russ, I need some thought for this. You've heard the flavor of what we're talking about here, Russell?
This is the first time hearing it.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to look at it.
Yeah,
From the position of the property and potential.
okay.
I have something, it's actually something that's,
Semi-
I've worked with actually law enforcement officials on these types of vehicles, and I got two retired law enforcement people on this board right here and multiple law enforcement people in the office. I've contacted Governor Cuomo's office, and these vehicles nationwide, and let's just say out of New York. New York is what's called a title branding state. These cars will be branded flood vehicles. Someone will come in here, anybody will buy one of these vehicles at an auction. What will happen with a lot of these vehicles is they'll go to a non-title branding state, and that title will get washed. And then all of a sudden, and it's happened before, it happened with Katrina, these vehicles will come back to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, wherever, and they'll say, 2010 Mercedes-Benz, perfect car. Unexpectedly, these people that live in all these communities will buy these as good vehicles. Or they'll create crime. They'll take that 2010 Mercedes-Benz. They'll buy the car at the auction for $1,000 as a flood car. They'll pop the VIN tag off of it. It's an ongoing problem, because I've talked to the National Institute on this. Ongoing problem. They pop the VIN tag, then they go out and steal the identical car and put that VIN tag on there. So I've contacted Governor Cuomo and asked his assistance in declaring that any of these flood cars should be scrapped and shredded. and that will remain up where they should be done, because the washing of the titles, all these insurance companies now are doing is trying to get back a little bit of their money, but in the end result, they're creating additional crime, as per the National Institute has told me, and unsuspecting people will end up buying these flood cars, thinking they're buying a great car for a good deal, and all of a sudden, they'll be in terrible shape. And I think it's something that really needs to go out there, and that's why I've contacted the governor and anybody else who wishes to do it. I've contacted Senator Flanagan, Senator Fitzpatrick, and I'm hoping something will happen, because on the New York State level, we really, and I hope the governor does it, that they shred all these vehicles, because it will really, in the long run, help the people of all the surrounding states and counties. And I think this needs to be out there, so maybe we'll get some sort of response.
Well, I'm not so sure I understand. You want some time to think about it also?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'm just telling you basically what will happen with these vehicles
Okay.
if the governor doesn't do something to protect the citizens of the state of New York.
Okay?
But I think we ought to set some kind of time limit on how long we're gonna go through this. I mean, this company, this insurance company, I'm sure is looking for other places to go. We shouldn't dwell on this for a long period of time. We should certainly study it and give them an answer within, say, a 2-week period of time.
Is that possible, Mr. Barnett?
But I guess what you would need is, from IAA, the formal outline of what they're proposing, so Russ, Frank, and I can look
Well, see to me now, and I don't wish to convolute this thing, if there's a rationale to do it, is it for the betterment of society and pitching a hand in for Hurricane Sandy? Or is it the pecuniary interest, or the $100,000? And how do we know that those cars will be out of there in a year? And do the cars get replaced as they go out? I don't want to bring another blight, if you will, to that area. And I think you have to consider that.
Absolutely.
I don't think we should be, it's almost like selling your zoning for $100,000. I'm not willing to sell the zoning for $100,000. I understand it's a bad situation, and maybe we need to help out, but it's something we really need to think about carefully.
Well, Bob, what do you want, a week to think about it?
A week or two, I think.
Okay, fine.
Russ, what do you
You
think?
want to hear
2
what
weeks
Russ
you
has
need?
got to say.
2 weeks?
Good.
Certainly, the community is going to, I think, under any circumstances, is going to
Set up a
object to
meeting
it.
and we'll go through it.
Possible. Okay, do you want it, you got it?
Just-
Oh, sorry?
I guess, well, Frank and I and Russ will do is just kind of get the proposal, look at it, and then present to the board in a memo form, hopefully within a week, of what's the request is, and the incidental consequences and to the town board. And then, before we go any further, the board has to consider, then say, yes, we'd like to consider further, or it's off the table and that's it. So
I think the supervisor said it a little more diplomatically than I'm gonna say it. We all know the person hasn't been a good neighbor.
Nobody answered that question.
Okay, I'm gonna answer it.
Okay.
Okay? Are we gonna reward someone for not being a good neighbor? That's the, I don't think it's proper.
Well, anyway, why don't we just reflect on it and get back within the 10 days
We're going to ask for a
or so.
proposal, correct? A more detailed
Gentlemen,
proposal.
can just get a, you can send it to my office.
I'll give them the information, so
Well, however you work it out, send it to me, then I'll disseminate to Russ and Frank. And then we'll just be able to
Thank you.
present to the board. All right? Thank you.
Okay, somebody, John, are you here to do the hurricane status review? John, or?
Yeah, that's next.
Yeah, it's the way it's written, so,
Can I have Lou up here with me on that also?
you know,
Thank you.
I don't disagree.
you're gonna be running the office, my pal.
Every step of the way, it's close to the fortune.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
These chairs are most uncomfortable. They are.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
What we're going to do today is just give a little overview of the storm and where we are right now with regard to it,
I'll give you this.
and where we have to go from here. Despite the fact that I guess this will be a storm that will be known for LIPA's failures, or communications failures to be more specific, As far as the town goes, without a doubt, the town of Smithtown and all its resources pulled together and did a commendable job for our residents. It was seamless. All the departments worked very well together. And as a result of that, we were far more organized and far more ahead of any other municipality in the county, and I stand behind that totally. As far as LIPA goes and its cooperation with the town of Smithtown, it was second to none, and I think the reason was we were very critical of LIPA in the previous storm, and as a result of that, we kept pace with demands with LIPA and trying to establish guidelines and a working standard operating procedure with LIPA. We never really came to a memorialized document, but we did work from our original SOP, or standing operation or procedures with LIPA. And as a result of that, within the first evening of the storm, I guess the storm kind of ebbed at 1 o'clock in the morning. We already had LIPA crews in place and were degenerating areas in the town that were critical for access and primary roads that would hinder our residents to affect any kind of emergency response from the fire department, police department, or ambulance corps. So LIPA was very responsive, and by daybreak Tuesday morning, we had opened up a tremendous amount of roadways based on that degeneration. And that degenerizing, what happens is then that allows our work crews to go in there with machinery and work in a safe and prudent manner. Without those lines being shut down, we can't affect any response there because it's unsafe for the people that operate our equipment. So as far as LIPA goes in the town of Smithtown, without a doubt, we did work hand in hand. We had direct contact with them. It was positive. Where they fail, I think we all will agree, is their lack of communication or lack of information with the public, which brings me to probably, I guess, our Achilles heel is that we too share this communication issue with LIPA, not to their degree, but we do. We have in place our TV station. We have our computer links, all of which were updated regularly and provided information to the public. But as we know, most people had no electricity, had no TV, and computer access was intermittent at best within the first couple of weeks. The systems were overwhelmed, which isn't really a direct effect on us as far as responsibility goes, but just, nationally, this storm crippled the internet, and it crippled all those different cellular communications that we have at hand. As I've spoke to most of the board individually, I think the time has come to set up something very similar to what they have in rural America, in that they maintain AM and FM radio stations continually through the year for local, local updates for weather, in farm communities and such. And I think that regionally, we have to push the county and the state to join as partners and come up with some type of regional access, whether it be on old style AM radio or FM, whatever it might be, that each town has equal opportunity to put forth concrete and concrete information that's really prudent to the storm and not political rhetoric. Information out there that really will help the residents. What happens is, as we all know, the political side of these type of events sometimes get more press than somebody that's out there like us that's just doing a really good job and just needs to get information to our residents. So we have to figure out how the town of Smithtown can better get information out to its residents without any political puff. You know, we really need to do that. And I think the answer to that is to do this and not reinvent the wheel, but to follow what is typical in rural America on how they provide this information.
Do our radio stations have procedures like that?
Well, they do, but they vet through, the press vets through,
I got it.
the radio vets through, and they decide what's important. I mean, we definitely were in there, Smithtown was there, but because we did a very professional job and because we manage all of our issues very well, they don't have, you know, the fanfare that some of these other stories may have. But it's just as important for our residents to know what's going on and what Smithtown is doing to assist them. And I think that that is definitely probably the biggest issue that we have here in Smithtown. We do a great job. We all come together. We exercise a very thorough plan, a very precise plan. But the residents, a lot of times, just don't know and don't understand what's going on. You know, a lot of the residents judge what one is doing by the truck. I haven't seen the highway truck. I have not seen a LIPA truck. And that's not, you know, really a good way to be judged. There's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of work being going on that I think our residents need to know. So it's something that we have to look forward to in the future to correcting. And
What would that AM radio communication do, John?
What it does is it's broadcasted on old-style AM
Right, right.
radio, and it's generated from, in the rural parts of America, they're federally based communication programs. So, for example, they may be in upstate New York, I believe they're transmitted out of Syracuse, Albany, and what you do is you just wait until your region comes up, and then you can hear the activity or the lack of activity or whatever it may be in that region. And during the year, it's basically used as a weather service.
Right.
And I believe that regionally, if we do it as a regional thing, I think it would be something that the feds would look upon favorably to fund. I don't see why they wouldn't. And for all we know, there may be something in place for us to do that at this time, but it's something that has not been visited. I think what happens is during these events, everybody gets very proprietary and just thinks about their own municipal entity and forgets that, you know, everybody needs to get information out there. And we can't depend on, you know, public media to vet through that. We need to have our message, our voice, what we deem to be important to our
Well,
residents.
that's something that we can investigate. That
Yes.
might have worked well with the charging stations here, for example. We had a number of them up, but no way to get to the community other than really word of mouth.
Right.
And many avail themselves of it. It's a great service, but you'd see, I came in on a Saturday, there were people here in the hallway, there were 10 or 12 people, but they said also, we would have never known this was here if we didn't hear it from someone, so something, and they had no power at all, but they were charging their computers and things here because the internet was back up.
Right.
Well, the same problem existed with the ice, of course. We had the ice, but a lot of people didn't know the ice was here.
Those are two perfect examples. And as you all know, most of you sat for long lengths of times in the Emergency Operations Center. You saw how things unfolded. And, you know, we definitely utilize every service we have available to get information out there. But it's dwarfed by these other more interesting or more played out events. But we still need that same airspace to make sure our residents know what's going on. We
Well,
shouldn't
before we
be,
should
we shouldn't be, our efforts shouldn't be diminished by doing a good job.
Okay, so now we're going to charge you with finding out all that information.
Well, I've already started to do that. But moving on a little bit, that I feel is probably the biggest negative that we had here was this information thing. The next thing is I really think it's important at, you know, the first of the year, there's some annual things that the board does collectively. I think one of the things that should be done is the board should most definitely remind department heads that we do have a town emergency plan. And as such, they have very specific and direct bullet responsibilities in that plan, bare minimum. And that they should make sure that when they do get the annual plan, the updates, that they don't just, put it as a shortcut on their computer screen and not review it. We did have some departments that kind of went off the grid, so to speak, and it became difficult at times to guess as to what things such as scheduling hours and personnel, depending on what personnel might they have available to us. We all come together. We like to move resources around, as you all witnessed, as you all participated in the Emergency Operations Center, and we need to know these things. So if nothing less than the town board reminding everybody once a year that you do have this plan and you should be up to date and up to speed and know what your responsibilities are during an event such as this, I think that that will definitely help us in the future. Okay, I guess the next thing to move on to would be, what are the financial ramifications of this storm and where we're gonna go with that. And I just want to point out to the board that unequivocally, this storm, outpaces Irene 3 to 4 times. There's no two ways about it. The debris management aspect of it alone has been a daunting task. We've got and we requested and received very early on resources from the feds, and we were obliged a considerable amount of resources based on past history and how we do exercise our plan. They put the faith in Smithtown and the trust to know that, or to understand that if we are requesting something, we're not requesting pie in the sky, we need it. So there were huge assets that were provided by the feds. I guess the one that stands out the most was the long hauling of debris and the processing of unprocessed debris. When all is said and done, we believe at this point, and we're still vetting through and processing all of our figures, we're getting, out of that estimate stage and going to what the facts are. You're going to be looking at least $5.3 million. We're pretty confident that that's what this storm is going to cost us. I mean, Irene cost us 1.3, and there's no doubt about it that I wouldn't provide a number any less than that. That we'll look at, in total, at 5.3 million. I think that the biggest component that we have right now left that we have to deal with, and I know part of that is contractual, and we're going to deal with that in executive session, but we have hard figures, and I know you've all heard this repeatedly during this whole period. I tend not to go with these pie-in-the-sky calculations. I like to talk to our field people, and whether they're department heads and out in the field or even subordinate personnel. I maintain a lot of contact with the, boots on the ground field people. And we have some very experienced people out there. So the Matty Goreckis and the, Glenn Jorgensen, who did a big field operation, who ran the field, who has a lot of experience in this type of thing, right down to Mike Weston, who's a subordinate of Matty's. I mean, he runs that ground operation there. Those people give me real figures and real feelings and have a tremendous amount of historic knowledge as how we process these type of things. So right now, when all is said and done, with the assistance of the feds and the state and this long hauling operation, we're left with one major task, and that is about 15,000 tons of what they consider to be processed material. These are the shreds and the chips. To be quite honest with you, if we had a storm tomorrow, another storm, I wouldn't be so quick to process material. I would open up our secondary staging areas and look to get rid of unprocessed material, because the feds were very gracious to us in providing the ability to do that, and that was vis-a-vis a contract with Brookhaven Town for the burn curtains, the long hauling, and such. So now, right now, we have equipment idle, so to speak, that we can't use for this processed material. So at worst case scenario, at 15,000 tons at, let's say, a prevailing rate of $75,000, you're looking at $1.25 million. At the low end, at the $10, you know, is vetted through the federal calculations, you're looking at $150,000. So Lou and I have started to, I should say Lou, in a very analytical way, is processing all the information that we gather for FEMA, because, you know, accounting principles, although the same as far as auditing goes, there are different principles in place, you know, that FEMA uses over true accounting principles. So we have to combine those things so that Lou can brief the board as to, you know, where this money is going to come from. Some of the money is real money. Some of it is on paper and will be quickly offset by the feds or the state. But there are other factors that will not. We do have to pay contractors. We do have to pay leases. We, at some point, will have to make the town of Brookhaven whole as per our agreement. We will get reimbursed for that. But there are some hard figures out here that Lou has to vet through and brief the board as to how we're going to pay these things. So it's something that's not going to go away quickly. And of course, I'll offer up, if anybody would like to ask any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I just really want to thank all the town employees. They did a tremendous job. They were there for us. They came to work. They worked the long hours. They put the time in, and they did it with a smile. We tried to interact as much as we could with our residents to get them the help. We personalized everything, and everybody basically put their life on hold for 4 weeks to clear this up for our residents. And I think if you just go just a little bit beyond Smithtown, you will visibly see the difference in how these other towns are. We are really in a good place right now, right down to, you know, getting back to some regular issues as leaf bags and whatnot, which we anticipated during the storm, and we formulated a game plan on how to address them during the storm so we weren't stepping over leaf bags. Everything was very well thought out. And that's all I have to say today, unless anybody has any questions.
Fine.
Thank you
John.
very much.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you, John,
Good
for
overview.
what you did, you and all the other department heads. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Appreciate it.
Item on the discussion of application fees and processing of refunds.
Yeah, I would like to address that, Mr. Supervisor, because a situation came up recently, and I'd like to ask Mr. Zolo to come up. There was a firm, the name of which is not important, that put in I think its third application for variances, and it went before the BZA, and the BZA refused to hear it. I kind of disagree with their,
You mean the applicant paid a fee?
yeah, they paid the fee first.
And so they think they're going to be on an agenda to be
Yeah,
heard.
and that is the issue, because apparently there is no fixed way of returning that application fee if the matter is not heard. They pay the fee up front. In this case, it was $1,100, and it just goes into Never Never Land, from the way I understand it.
So there's a rationale as to why the BZA doesn't want to hear it?
Yeah, their rationale was they had applied for two previous, two applications had come before them, previous, and they did not want to hear it again.
And what's
They
the
thought it was
difficulty in that?
basically the same thing.
What's the difficulty in returning their application fee? Anybody
There is no
Method
set
to do
way
that?
of doing it, apparently.
My sense is it's always been done on a case-by-case basis, and basically it would be a request to the town board asking to money to be released. But there's nothing in the in the town code that does that.
Mr. DeRubius would like to be heard.
Routinely, we return fees when the town makes a mistake. In other words, if,
They have the one example.
when, for example, we just recently had someone applied for a variance, they were given a denial, they paid the fee. My staff examined that particular, not the one we're talking about, but a different application, and realized that, the person didn't need the variance, and so we refunded the fee. When it's our fault, I normally refund the fee because it's our mistake. In this particular case, what's the difference is that the applicant made an application to the Board of Appeals, which the board took a look at on their part. They had they held a meeting on that in terms of discussion, and they felt in their own minds that the applicant was repackaging a previous variance that they denied. That was their conclusion. And so therefore, which is in the prerogative of the Board of Appeals, the board is not bound to, they are bound to accept an application, but they are not bound to hear a new application. This is by state law. So the board said they're not going to hear it. It's basically a denial of that particular application. At that point, the applicant asked for a refund of that particular application. I declined to give that refund because the town was not at fault here in terms of saying, that we asked him to make an application. The applicant did on his own. So the issue, the only one that could resolve whether he gets his money back or not is this town board. We cannot make that decision.
I'm a little unclear. Somebody puts an application in, and because they have a prior history with that board, is that what you're saying?
They
That
ask
it won't
for,
be heard?
they ask for a variance.
Right.
Or they ask for a series of variances.
Right.
Let's say 5 variances. They were granted 4 of the variances, one of them, they were not granted.
Okay.
And what they did was they came in with a new application, and it was essentially the one that was turned down that they wanted, they put it in a different way. They moved it a little bit on the site, and what the board concluded was that this was the same element that they had denied. And so they were not going to rehear it because it was
Okay,
repackaging.
but let me just get to cut the chain. So whether the applicant had an intention to wiggle his way in to get this thing heard, it's refused to be heard. Well, why would we keep his money?
That's a board decision. I can't,
See, I think,
In the
sorry.
past, though, they could apply to the town board.
See, I
That's what
think,
you're saying, by law, they could apply
They-
to this board to each.
you have the authority, the town board has the authority to make any financial decision. I only make decisions where to refund where the town is in error here. The town is not in error here.
I think in the case that Frank spoke about, there was a refund of $250 because they made application on a variance that wasn't required, so I said, you don't need this, so here's your $250. In this case, an applicant, basically what they did was, in my assessment and Frank's assessment, is they submitted the same, seeking similar relief that they had asked before and just dressing up a little bit differently. And I think Frank's saying it's not a mistake on error on the part of the planning department, so there's no basis for a refund. But I believe the town board, and that's what we're talking about, has the ability to just say, you know what, in this instance, the refund should occur, or at least a partial refund, because I think that's the way to look at it.
I don't want to interrupt. I would say, how much time did your staff spend on that application? And whatever it is, that's the administrative fee, and give back the person the rest of the
My
money.
idea is 30% for the review, and if you're not
Yeah.
heard, you give back the other 70%.
Yeah, well, I would
But
wanna
the
make
point is, they should get back some of their
some
money.
of the money. I
I'm not
agree.
saying they should get it all
The
back.
$1,100 was submitted with the expectation to get to the board. They didn't get to the board, but there's still a processing time.
Yes,
spent
of course
processing.
there is. It's administrative.
So Councilman McCarthy's recommendation of a
What about-
30% seems to,
$700 back is fine. I think that would cover our
So can we
costs.
set that as policy? Do we
I
have to
think
change
we will
the
do
code?
That's what I
that.
think we should do.
The
yeah.
memo, a memo should come from the supervisor's
But you
office.
say, look, I don't want to be nitpicking here. 30% is an arbitrary number. How much time did your staff spend on it?
Well,
So you say we spent $600 on it, you give them the difference.
Well, if you want, we could probably calculate
That
it, but
should
what
be a
I'm
fair
saying,
way.
we
But
did
it-
advertise it.
In reality, it's not that much, couldn't have been that much time spent on reviewing it. it was made, the decision was made very clearly. They have applied twice before. This is not anything different, although they say it's different. So it can't be a ton of money.
I think fair is fair.
It shouldn't be. It should be a reasonable
Yeah, I agree.
amount of money.
Well, I think
You
they
know-
should use timesheets on every application, just like a lawyer book has. They have the carbon copies, the 3x7s, every time, .3, .7. And whatever hours time is put into that, boom, you calculate it up. If it's not heard, they get that back by
Tommy,
the hourly rate.
Tommy, in all due respect to Mr. Zolo, let's not get involved in more legals
Yeah.
than we have to.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the way,
Okay,
you know,
but
you do it.
we're all
You really
agreed
want to do
that
it.
there's going to be a rebate of money, less expenses that you incurred. Is that what?
I would agree
We
with
hold
that.
administrative fees.
Yeah,
and
it should be,
the rest.
All right,
If you
Frank.
want, we could do an analysis, but what I'm trying to get at is that there were several meetings on this. I mean, I could probably, with staff members and BZA time, I could probably come up with some big numbers if I had to. I think what your board is trying to figure out is what is fair in this
Yes,
particular
exactly.
case.
Exactly.
And I think what Councilman McCarthy suggested, even though it is somewhat arbitrary, it is, I think,
It's totally arbitrary, not somewhat.
no, I think it is a good compromise, because the time we will spend documenting this might, we're not gonna save anything.
All right,
Let's just
okay.
come up
But I
with a
think that
number.
might
Bob,
have
to your point, we're taking care of that.
But what's the fee if you requested a rehearing? Let's just say you were denied a BZA application, you wanted to ask the board to rehear it. What's that fee?
It would be the same, well, there's two fees that are involved. One, to request the rehearing, which is simply a $50 fee, okay, that you would pay. That has, but then that, once the board accepts that, then you have to pay the full fee. So that's on top of that. The request to rehear is,
in this case, it was $1,100.
But I thought to me like, there might be a $250 fee when you said that's the same. This is basically what they did here is they kind of disguised what really was a rehearing application.
I think we all agree, it's a matter of fairness, that's all. Should be some sort of procedure.
It's no different than a building permit, almost. You apply for a building permit for multiple thousands of dollars, you finally get the building permit, you don't build, people really are entitled to something back.
Yeah, we shouldn't be in the business of taking money from the taxpayers and
I mean,
not,
there's no inspection, the permit expires, they should be entitled to something back. I mean,
Okay, we're clear on that, okay?
I think we're gonna do a 30%. Is that?
So why don't you discuss it and send us a memo on
Okay.
what you
I
recommend?
think just
Work out
do
what you think is fair.
what Councilman McCarthy said. That's simple.
Okay,
If we
done,
do all this other
done,
analysis, we're
done,
gonna spend
done,
hours on it.
done.
Yeah.
I'll do memos to the board.
Okay.
so we can make that decision now, is everybody willing to do 30%? Instead of
30%.
memos to the board, so we can get it off the table?
I'll send a memo to the
No, it's
board.
fine, fine.
I'll send a memo to the board.
Supervisor?
Fine.
So all five are fine?
Yeah.
So
70/30.
just save yourself a memo.
We're doing 30%.
And we all just agreed on 30/70, so.
he's a lawyer, he'll
Okay.
do a memo anyway.
We have a public hearing scheduled for commercial centers, and there's a discussion about that this morning because of the plan that came in. So we'll discuss it, and then we'll decide whether this is going to stay on as is or not.
I'd like to move the table it personally.
Well, that's what I said, I think
All
we
right,
should
fine.
table it. Mr.
Okay.
DeRubies has requested mid-January, Mr. DeRubies?
Yes, I know.
To come up with a alternative with continuing to expedite
I agree.
site plan procedures. So I would agree to table it.
That's good. Table.
And the next one is this, the Lawrence Road report. Is that on the agenda? Well, we talked
No,
about
it's
it
not.
anyway.
Just, Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to speak to Mr. Doobies about some clarification, and I'll be as brief as possible. About a year ago, we did a presentation from the planning department on about 125 or 30 acres on Lawrence in Northport, about the possibility of what we were going to do to clean that up. We have everybody knows we have a number of illegal uses down there. We cannot, we're not successful in the courts. There's a lot of outside storage. It was agreed by the board and unanimously to go out. Mr. Ruby said he didn't have the resources at the time, and there was some correspondence, they didn't have the expertise in this department to actually undertake a project like that. So the board agreed to an expenditure of $20,000, and we went out for an RFP, and we have Balbasano Architects dispatched to prepare a report on that area to the town board. My confusion is, contrary to what was reported, I received a copy of this report the day after Mr. DeRubius received it. And on the same day I received it, it appears in the press. And I'd just like to take a moment, if you will. This is Newsday. Businesses on the remaining 34 acres of property rezoned for light industry would be allowed to store equipment outdoors, which is now barred, which we understand, but is being done illegally. We can't win in court. The community might not like this at all, said Planning Director Frank DeRubius. The industrial users in that area have not been good neighbors. This enlargement may end up becoming even a bigger problem. And my confusion comes, with all due respect, Mr. DeRubius, because I believe this is misleading the residents. I think the procedure should be, your department received the report. You and your staff should be doing a comprehensive view of the outside engineering or the architectural firm's report. And then you should bring that to this board, I believe, and we should have a discussion before we go out and put something like this in the press to the residents. I mean, on its face, if I'm a resident and don't know any better, I'd think that we were trying to dump a heavy industry outside storage zoning category on that property, and that's not at all what we did, because the use table is not included in that. Now, the residents down there should know if we're gonna go to the press, and that's why I think it should have been discussed here prior. There's office and medical buildings, light industry, research and development, agriculture, commercial poultry farms, animal husbandry, park playground, nature preserves, fitness centers, mini storage, wholesale, business, outdoor storage, ball fields, and recreation, which personally I think out of those uses could be a good start at rezoning and having some of these property owners come in. So I'm a little confused as to why we kind of went backwards at this, to be quite honest. I don't quite understand that. It also stated in press that there's a stir about it. I don't know about any stir. We got a report, and that's what we're doing. And then with all due respect again, Mr. Ruby said that he met 5 weeks ago with the representative from Baldessano. He had not heard back from the consultant again until the draft study arrived in his office Monday. Mr. Ruby said he assumes that it is the town board's consideration that the land use study will be completed prior to the January 24th Lettieri public hearing. That would be up to your department. We cannot move forward on the Baldessano situation until you do a complete review of it and come back and give us your thoughts on, do you agree, you don't agree, how does it fit, et cetera.
Well, could I respond to the last part?
Sure.
The town board scheduled the Lettieri case for a zone change. That was your decision, and certainly your prerogative. I was asked by the press, why did you schedule the Lettieri case when the study, at the time you did it, the study was not yet published? My response was that I was replying basically in your defense, and that was, I was saying that I would assume that the town board is expecting that the study will be presented to the board long before Lettieri's public hearing. That's basically what that statement says.
Okay.
So in other words, you scheduled the public hearing. At that time, we did not have the study. When I was asked that particular question, I said, and I happened to know, because of my meeting with the consultant 5 weeks prior, that he had completed a study. I expected that the board would anticipate that you would have the study in hand prior to the Lettieri zone change. That's why you did it. That was my response to that particular question that was answered to me. Mm-hmm.
You will agree that I would hope, that I think it would have been proper for your department to review this and then bring it to this board before we go out to the public.
I
Because-
certainly would, but except that the press had copies of this particular report, and I was asked.
Well, how would the press get copies of a report from an RFP before the town board members? I mean, we received a call from Baldessano
Mhm.
that the report was done, except there was a delay in the yield, the fiscal yield, because a company that was doing it decided they didn't want to do it, and that would come later. And they asked, I believe, Mr. Creighton, the other portion of it is completed, what do you want to do? And we said, you have to send it to the planning department, and then they will take hold of it and review it.
We received, I will tell you right now, the press did not receive a copy, and I never, ever give a copy of anything before the board sees it.
Well, let's get to the
And-
bottom now.
Okay?
Mr. McCarthy called me and said that you had called him, and there was a voucher or an invoice.
An invoice,
Is that
yes.
what you call it? An invoice that had to be paid, and you were not in possession of the report.
That's correct.
Tom called me because I'm the fiscal officer. I called Mr. Badalamenti and said, I have a voucher here of invoice, and I don't know what it was, $8,000, I think. And I said, we don't have, we paid for a product, and we don't have a product.
Yes.
And I said, I can't pay until there's a product in hand. I believe the third day from that call, I received a facsimile copy, which I believe I gave to you.
Yes.
Okay. That's what happened here.
And that says, and if you look at that cover letter on that facsimile copy, it says there's still another 2 weeks to go before they're gonna give us the final part of it, so it's not even done yet.
Correct.
So I don't know why they're calling for payment.
That I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, they shouldn't be paid until it's
Exactly, that's
completed.
when Frank called me, I says, no, you don't have a copy, you don't pay it.
Well, we've had no discussion at all about payment because it doesn't come to us.
Usually doesn't, no. That's why I
What
was surprised
concerns
I had to
me
call.
is that it says in the newspaper, and we can't speak for the newspaper, but it says that people in town hall believe that certain council people have that report and have held on to that report prior to it going to the supervisor and to the planning department. I am here to tell you unequivocally, from my point of view, that is absolutely untrue. I have before me the copy that I received from the planning department, timestamped, on the 5th of December, and that's the first time I saw it. I believe it's the first time Mr. Wareheim saw it, and the first time anybody saw it.
First time I saw it.
So I don't know where that came from, but I'm here to tell you,
Where, what came from?
it is totally untrue.
Oh, but I want to give you the, how, I was not even aware that the report was in hand anywhere. When Mr. McCarthy called me and said that you called him and said you didn't want to pay the bill because there was no report in hand.
That's correct.
I had no report. So I called Mr. Badalamenti and said, we paid for a product. He said, well, I met with your guys. Now, I don't know what that means. And I said, I don't know what you mean by that. And he said, he met with David and you.
That's correct.
Okay. I said, well, I would like to see a report. The next day, I got a facsimile report. That's all. That's the story.
And for point of clarification, I did speak to Mr. Badalamenti about 2 weeks prior. He told me there was some delay, he would get it to us very quickly, and when it was finished, where should it go? I said it should go to the supervisor and to Frank DeRubius. And in fact, in the letter here that I have from Mr. Badalamenti, a copy of the one that went to you, it says, "Hi Supervisor Vecchio, Frank and Dave. Nice speaking to this AM, and here is the attached PDF."
And that's Friday, I got that?
That would be on the 3rd of December.
That was Monday.
Monday.
And
I
we-
must have called him on a Friday.
And the town board was made aware of it on the 5th, and that's the first time the town board was made aware of it, which is completely in opposition to what is printed in the newspaper.
My main concern here is that this policy is backwards. I'm trying to ascertain why, number one. And we should find out why, because this is an extensive project that we're undertaking. As everybody here knows, and it's no secret, this entire town board, Supervisor Vecchio, and this entire town board, have been accused by those residential communities around there
Doing
that we've
nothing.
been sitting on our hands for 30 years, doing nothing. And when you did your presentation, Mr. Doobies, there were 3 issues. One was do nothing. One, I believe, was to go this route, and one was far more extensive and more expensive. And I believe I'm correct in stating this town board, in poll 5-0, decided to take this step. And we're moving along famously to get this, to sit down and have your professional opinion with your staff, and then it's all over the press, the phones are ringing, residents are calling, making accusations that we're going back to laying heavy industry zoning down there. And it's absolutely not true. It's not true for any, no one's doing that. No one on this board is doing anything like that. We have a number of, which I believe, and maybe supervisor and the rest of the board don't agree with me, and that's fine. I think there are some items in this use table that will absolutely fit down there. One of the properties that we're discussing here about storing vehicles, and I'm not, like the supervisor, I'm not all that big on it at this particular point. They're looking for the possibility of putting a professional baseball facility in there. That was the purpose of this, and I am extremely upset for myself because of the false accusation, and for the residents being misled, and I don't believe that we should be doing this. And somehow, I believe, somebody should find out how the press got a hold of this
Well, I
prior
can-
to this board ever having it.
No, first off, I could tell you that the press was never gotten a hold of this from my office with regard to this. I have a rule in my office that basically, and this is not only for the town board, but for all the other planning boards, the board members have to see it first before the press gets a hold of it. We received a copy of this report by email, I believe on December 4th, that we received it. I believe I called Councilman McCarthy, and I'm not sure if I called you, Mr. Supervisor. And I remember somebody called my office and said, make copies and distribute it to the other board members. Okay? And so we made I was out of the office at the time at another meeting.
That's in addition to the facsimile copy that I received?
No, you received that copy
I gave it to you.
and you gave it to me, but that was a facsimile copy,
Right.
and I didn't do
Probably
anything
couldn't
with
read
it.
it.
I received an email the following day, and that was the formal report. I would say this, once I receive a report, a public document, and Councilman Wareheim, this may address one of the area issues. My feeling is that these are not confidential documents, they're public documents, so that if, once the town board sees these documents, anybody could see them. That's how I approach it. Unless I'm otherwise directed by
No,
a
I think
board.
Mr. Wareheim is saying is basically comments regarding the document until you've had time for your staff to look it over it, and then and even present it to the town board really aren't prudent because it's scaring people where it shouldn't be.
Mr. McCarthy's correct. I have no problem with the if it becomes a public document. My problem comes from, I do not believe that we, as town officials, ought to be making these comments to the press. Perhaps the comment should have been, we just received it, we have to do an extensive review of it, and then we will present it to the town board, and then you'll hear what the actual decisions are. Because otherwise, this is, to me, it's just no way to do business. It's insanity to do something like this.
So your problem is that Frank spoke to the press about the report before anybody else had a chance to review it
Well,
or get comments.
Mr.
That's a
Supervisor,
problem.
what I said is, Frank, this is, Mr. Derubi's, it's not a personal attack on you. It's just that it's in quotes. Community might not like this. Well, I'm not so sure that that's true. We have a number of uses put in here that I've spoken to residents and property owners that lauded what we were producing
What
here.
was the date of that?
This was before the report. This is a couple days before.
This
I
is
don't have it.
December 3rd, this
This
report.
is probably the second. I'd have to check the date on the paper. Then it says the industrial users in that area have not been good neighbors. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Some have, some haven't been good neighbors. The enlargement may end up becoming an even bigger problem. To me, that just appears to me, if I'm a reader of this paper, like, what are these people doing? They're spending $20,000 of my tax dollar, and they're gonna make the problem worse. I mean, I just think it's prudent that we come to a decision here, that these kind of things, when a report like this comes, we should be addressing it first as a board, from the professionals that give advice, like Mr. Derubi's, Mr. Barnett, and Mr. Valentine and department heads. and then give the press the story. I mean, look, if someone was to ask me that, I could tell you Mr. McGowan's here. If he was to ask me that question, I'd go, that's under review by the board. We don't have a decision on anything yet. We may accept the report, we may not.
I have a problem with the fact that this is in the paper on December 3rd, and the town board never even gets the report until December the 5th. I think that's totally inappropriate.
And I would check, I will tell you that I had a brief conversation with Mr. Flynn, you can check with him, and I was upset about the accusation that, and I'll only speak for myself, I received the report and was sitting on it, which is a bold-faced lie. I never saw the report until this showed up on my desk, okay? Nor would I do anything like that.
And the bad part about that is we can't say anything.
I asked Mr. Flynn, how could something like that get out? That type of accusation. And his answer to me was, it might have been my fault, and perhaps you want to look into this, but the fact that I made a statement to him or you about how I felt the northern portion of that property, now known as the Raleigh Farm, and I think Zernicke's property, I felt from your presentation, and I think you will admit that I've told you that a year ago, I believe, irregardless of this report, that should remain residential up there. Because if you make it industry, you're putting it in the center of a number of residential homes. And then from the Korea property south to Northport, that's the portion we should begin to look at whether or not we want to
Well,
implement
okay,
this.
but now we're off the point. Let me ask a question. This Badalamenti, why does he send a bill and he hasn't issued a report?
Well,
I have no idea.
And then on a Monday, I didn't
He
remember.
should not.
I get a facsimile report that I couldn't even read, and I gave it to Frank DeRubi's.
But I think the proposal was part of it would be paid, it'd be paid in halves, initial half.
But there was nothing, no product. There was no product
We'd
on the
already
bill.
paid the previous,
paid, okay.
we already
Okay?
paid the first part.
So, now,
There was a two-part payment.
did somebody just say this is not finished yet?
It's not finished, it says it
No,
right
the
there.
yield, the fiscal yield portion of it is not done because the company that was doing that for him, he advised us, backed out. And he had to restart
Oh.
it with a different company, so that's a bit away yet, which should be part of the report.
Well, I'm not, my own tiny review of this report, it's not, wasn't worth the paper it's printed on, except for some things. I mean, to recommend that residential portions, which is up Indian Head Road, should be industrial, is mind-boggling,
And I agree.
mind-boggling.
I agree.
But I don't have the ability to read these things, they're kind of technical, but, yeah, it really was bollock stuff, there's no two ways about
Well,
it.
I agree with you too about the residential, but I also think that the correct procedure would have been for this report to go to Mr. DeRubius, who should review it and then give us
Yeah.
his version of it. We
But-
should not be reading about it in the
But
Smithtown
what's the
News.
obligation of the vendor? You commission a report, and he's asking for payment, and to my knowledge, nobody has a report.
We don't know anything about
I
that.
can't address that because I don't pay the bill, so
And so, well, I don't pay them either, but you apparently called him and said you don't want to pay it.
I called,
he called me and said,
Councilman
"Don't pay the bill."
McCarthy's my liaison,
He
and
asked
I
me-
got
Oh.
the bill.
Should I pay it? And I says, do you have the report? He says, no.
Right.
I says, no, you don't have the report, you don't pay it.
Of course.
Well-
I think we all agree to that.
And that's it.
So are we going to get an overview from the planning department on this?
Would you like it in writing, or would you, how
I
would you
think you're going to
prefer?
make
Oh, absolutely.
a
Renee.
writing, yeah, absolutely, a
Sure. Okay.
report, written report.
And remember
However-
also, excuse me, but this is, and we discussed this, this report on that segment is something we also wanted to look at to go further down the road, down Northport Road, for other properties down there. That was the purpose of trying to get a different zoning category. Otherwise, we're gonna be in the same place that Mr. DeRuby said
30 years from now.
last year,
Yeah.
Okay,
we're doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's unacceptable.
Well, where are we with this report in light of the public hearing that's scheduled?
it has nothing
It
to
has
do with
nothing to
it.
do with it.
Nothing to do with that?
Right.
Nothing, well, indirectly it could, but mostly it's not. This is a separate issue. The critical issue that's missing from here, which is the foundation of really a lot of this, is the economic analysis that he says that he's supposed to give us.
Correct.
I have serious reservations with regard to that particular aspect, because that is the sum and substance of
Well,
most of my
listen,
objectives,
well,
and so I
Sure.
would need to have that.
Why don't
in
you
order-
do it, what we had just had requested? review it and give us a written summary of what it's in that report.
Can I wait for that economic analysis?
absolutely,
Yeah,
Or-
absolutely.
Because otherwise, it makes no sense.
That's part of what I'm trying to bring to the table here, is that the report wasn't even finished. And it's already being cited in the
And why would
Look, I-
why would that consultant meet with your people?
Well, they met with us to go over the zoning of that particular area. This was 5 weeks ago. And I believe they wanted to find out if some of these things would work in terms from a zoning point of view. And so they came, because they're actually, what they're doing in there is creating a new zoning category in between that. So that's why they met with us. The Councilman Wareham, I understand what you're saying about waiting for an analysis, and I apologize if there was the board did not have, let's say, adequate notice on this particular item, but appreciate the fact that, and this is only a statement, it's not a rationale. When the press gets a hold of this and they're asking me questions, I did preface my remarks by saying I hadn't had time to really review this. And I believe, although the press is here and they will acknowledge that. And I said, as an overview, there are some concerns that I have with that, and that's the nature of the question.
I think the
That
worst
is-
mistake there, I haven't had time to review this, it should have been a period, and that was it.
Well, I'll keep that in mind, Councilman McCarthy. I think you're correct on that. So I apologize, Councilman Wareheim, but it was an inadvertent statement, just said more or less in general. But there wasn't, I did not until actually meet with my staff till last Friday to go into any detail on this particular report.
Well,
So-
apology accepted, and I hope you understand my motivation here.
Okay.
And as far as your staff goes, as I said, perhaps you ought to speak to them also, because, they have to be careful what they're saying also because of what, and this is kind of evident here on what that can turn into.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, last item is the capital budget. I went over this with Lou yesterday. I don't know if you all have copies of it. I'm going to make a suggestion that Lou should review it. There are some items in here of, small amounts that he'd have to determine whether there's money to pay them in small amounts rather than capitalize it. And so in substance, would ask the controller to make the recommendations about which items ought to be capitalized. You okay with that, Lou?
Next year.
Need me to do, I'm fine.
Okay.
In other words, which ones we
Well, for
could
example, you got here,
budget and.
you got
which ones-
$18,000. I don't know whether you want to put that into a capital budget.
Or
So,
or putting it operating, right?
yeah, or
Okay.
put it in next year's
Understood.
operating somewhere or other. There are large items here, and I think those need to be done. So I would hope by the next work session that we would have an ability to adopt a certain amount of funding or begin
Wouldn't
the
it be
process.
wise to have some of the department heads at the work session so we could discuss some of these,
Well,
the need
yeah,
for these items?
Well, they all put these in at budget time, they put it in with their budget papers. So, the reason they requested them was because they think they need them, but because the budget was so tight, I just put those kind of capital, requests on the side.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah,
A lot's changed since the budget time.
Yeah.
And as a result of this storm, there's a lot of things that
Yeah.
focus has drawn us to, so
well,
I would like the opportunity to,
one of the items here was a chipper.
right.
And so that was in last year's budget, which we didn't adopt. The two generators for the pumps, that needs to be done. So I suggest, I can go over these with Lou and we'll make a recommendation, or you can do it yourself, whatever you want.
It's fine to, if Lou wants to do that, it's fine. I do think, though, that we should have a work session and have some discussion on some of these things with some of the department heads.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from some departments.
Okay, it's fine.
And it's
This
one,
way we know what the final product is.
and there's one thing in here, and it's not in here, because, and Russ tells me he can't do his job. We should have this, we spent $75,000 on a new marina that will cover itself, all its bonding, all its expenses, over 120%. But Russ says he can't do the environmental thing in-house. It needs to be here. This has been going on since 1968. I got a copy of the report everybody had given for years. I mean, 68's a long time ago. We sent $75,000 out of the park fund over the past 5 years, making plans, permits, flyovers, topographicals, everything, and it sits because Russell can't do it in-house and he doesn't have the money. The board needs to decide, they're gonna give him the money. It won't cost the taxpayers a dime when it's built because of the fact, and it comes out of the park fund because it's a new park, so that won't be taxed either. So it's something, we need to move on. This has been sitting, Vinnie's got a list downstairs of over, what, 6,000 people waiting, an 18, 22-year list, and,
But
if
in
you read
all
all these
fairness,
reports.
when you say it's sitting here, there was no support on the town
Yes,
boards
there
to,
was.
no.
Everybody here voted to spend the money
No,
to do the plans and
every
permits.
year that we did the budget, that was never put into the
No,
capital
but Russell
budget.
is saying he can't do the environmental part in-house. So he needs the board's support.
Well, there
And I'm
wasn't
asking
much,
if the board wants to support having Russell do the environmental part of it. It's either yes or no.
Is that the step we're at?
Yes.
That's where we're
well,
at.
Yes.
but there wasn't, look, I'm not opposed to
Do we have a
marinas and I'm not
dollar
for
amount?
them.
Roughly?
The
Okay.
history of that is that we would never get DEC approval for that marina.
But you know the old saying, if you don't ask, you don't get?
Well, you want, do
Basically,
you,
everybody's been saying that for years. We don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have it. But we never really go down and sit down and really put in a full environmental assessment of what we plan on doing. In 1968, the area where this board has proposed putting this was dredged for that marina. It wasn't waterlands, it was new waterlands made for it. And everybody can, yeah, hey Bob, I don't know if you have that, and Eddie probably has it, but I'll give you new copies, so everybody has them again. But, I mean, these people and these voters in our community, we're a water community, need either a yes or a no answer. I'm tired of everybody saying, when is it gonna happen, when is it gonna happen, when is it gonna happen? It's either we're gonna do it, or we're not gonna do it, and they need an answer. The bottom line, we've expended
Well,
over
Tom, you-
75,000, can I finish?
yeah.
They've expended over $75,000 in park fund money so far, doing plans, permits, topographical, dredging analysis, all of it, and, it just sits. And it's a project that pays for itself. And it's either a yes or a no. If you want to know, that's fine. I'm one of five. I think it's a good idea.
I don't think, Tom, that was ever a no by the town boards.
Well, that's why we spent $75,000.
No, it always was a matter that would never come to fruition.
But we don't know if
Well,
we don't do the
Russell
environmental
Barnett is
aspect.
here, ask Russell Barnett.
The contention that it cannot
Come up here, Russell.
The argument over whether or not it can or can't happen goes back to a New York State DEC letter where I believe it was Chuck Hamilton from Marine Habitat indicated that a new marina in Stony Brook Harbor would not be permitted by his office. The argument as to whether or not that is a complete no for DEC or not is the issue at hand. I can tell you, after having spoken with Mr. Hamilton when he issued that letter, that there was an expression by DEC personnel that if the town of Smithtown was interested in building a new marina, they would look more favorably upon a marina in Nissaquag River as opposed to Stony Brook Harbor.
Right, and then I talked to the DEC people, and I gave them a copy of this report. They were not even under the aware of that it was actually dredged for a marina back under this report for the town. They always thought that was pure 100% wetlands. They had no idea that it was
Russell, what is the
dredged for
time
that.
frame that we're talking about? What Mr. Hamilton said,
Oh, that letter now is a few years old.
what is a few years?
It's got to be at least 4 years old at this point.
So it's either we give Russell the ability to do the report that the DEC wants and the Joint Village Commission wants, or we don't. And it's either one or the other, and people just need an answer.
If the board would like, I can pull out those files and pull out the relevant documents and provide you all with copies so that you can make.
I would like to see
You
them.
should revisit it.
Yeah, I would like to see
It's
them.
either a yes or a no. Let's just
Yeah, but
let
I'd
the
like
people
to,
finally
I'd
know.
like to see what is in those documents
Right.
before I say yes or no.
And if it's a no, it's a no. If it's a yes, it's a yes. But the bottom line, people need an answer.
Okay, we'll supply that to us.
Okay,
Absolutely.
we have just one executive minute on a contract.
One contract and one litigation matter.
Okay, I'll move to go into executive session.
Second.
Supervisor, before you go into executive, you had mentioned doing a work session on your budget. You schedule that now?
Well, I think the supervisor wants to speak to Lou first to see if some of those items can be
Yeah.
paid for out of operating budget. And then when we get the final list, we can talk to schedule work session for department heads.
So you want the contractual item first?
Executive session,
Yeah,
all in
whatever's
favor?
first, whatever.
Russ,
Aye.
if you can get us an
No, you
estimate of
call
what you
executive
think it
session.
would take
Just
for you to
your
do your
vote.
report.
Everybody's in favor of going to executive
All
session.
in favor, aye.
Aye. So Russ is gonna get an estimate of what he thinks.
Okay.
Just to give them.
All right, we're back
on.
Days and made some phone calls.
Okay, I'll move to close the executive session.
Okay.
All in
Second.
favor?
One
All in
resolution.
favor, yes, yes.
One
Wait,
resolution for
Ju-
two items.
Time out. Wait a minute, don't go away. Gotta put the dick on. Okay, you're on.
I'll move to close the executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 1:15 PM.
John, that's